In the heart of southern Spain, nestled between the towering peaks of the Sierra Morena and the lush plains of the Guadalquivir Valley, there once thrived a civilization so rich, so powerful, it seemed to hold the secrets of the earth itself. Picture it, the sun casting its warm glow over sprawling fields, where the fertile land blooms with vibrant greenery, nourished by the winding Guadalquivir River that snakes through the valley like a shimmering vein of life. The air hums with the scent of wildflowers, mingling with the earthy aroma of the riverbanks, while towering trees, their leaves shimmering in the golden light, provide shade for farmers and traders alike. But beneath the soil, a hidden treasure pulsed, veins of silver that gleamed like streaks of lightning through the mountains, veins that promised untold wealth to anyone who could unlock their secrets. It was this very treasure that made Tartessos so coveted, so untouchable. The city, with its cedarwood palaces and bustling markets, was not just a place of commerce, it was the heartbeat of an empire. A hub where cultures met, trades flourished, and secrets were exchanged. How could such an empire, so abundant, so influential, simply vanish without a trace? With wealth flowing like a river and power stretching across the Mediterranean, the kingdom of Tartessos had all the trappings of immortality. Yet, in the blink of an eye, it disappeared. Was it destroyed by the hand of a rival empire? Did it fall victim to the greed of those who wanted to claim its treasures for themselves? Or did Tartessos fade slowly, slipping quietly into the mists of time, leaving behind only ruins and myths? What truly happened to this mighty kingdom? How could a civilization so advanced, with riches that dazzled the ancient world, vanish like smoke, leaving us with nothing but whispers carried by the wind? Now that you've heard the beginning of this mystery, you're probably wondering how it all ends. But here's the thing. If you're enjoying this journey, don't let it end here. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Don't just be a bystander to history, be a part of it. We've got so many more incredible stories to uncover together, and we don't want you to miss a single moment. If you're not subscribing right now, we'd love to know why. Please, tell us in the comments. What's holding you back? We promise we're listening and want to hear your thoughts. And before you go, drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. No matter where you are, you're part of the mystery we're solving here. The Guadalquivir Valley. Its name may not resonate in the minds of most, but it was once the beating heart of a civilization so rich it seemed untouchable, immortal. Picture it. The land bathed in sunlight, where the mountains rise in the distance, sharp and jagged, their snow-capped peaks casting long shadows over the fertile valley below. To the west, the Guadalquivir River winds through the valley, its waters glistening with the promise of prosperity, carrying the lifeblood of a civilization that would one day rival the most powerful empires of the ancient world. The valley is lush, the earth thick with olive trees, vineyards, and the buzz of bees around wildflowers. This wasn't just any piece of land. It was a place that would give birth to a kingdom whose riches would captivate the Mediterranean world. It was here, in this land of natural beauty and wealth, that Tartessos took root. Imagine standing by the river, its waters rippling gently under the warm Spanish sun as the ancient city of Tartessos grows before your eyes, a thriving metropolis at the crossroads of commerce, innovation, and myth. The ancient city wasn't just a hub for trade, it was the epicenter of a civilization that would shine brighter than any other in the Mediterranean, at least for a time. Tartessos, a kingdom born out of this rich landscape, was strategically placed in the heart of one of the most valuable regions of the ancient world. Here, in what is now modern-day Andalusia, southern Spain, the geography offered not only fertile land, but abundant resources that no other civilization could match. The Guadalquivir River, stretching for miles, provided easy access to both inland and coastal trade. And nestled within the surrounding mountains, the Sierra Morena, lay one of the kingdom's most precious resources, silver. This treasure, hidden deep beneath the earth, would become the kingdom's lifeblood, fueling its economy and elevating it to a position of power. The story of Tartessos doesn't begin with a single ruler or a decisive battle. Instead, it is the story of a blending of cultures, a crossroad of people who saw the potential in this rich land and forged a new beginning. The first settlers of this kingdom weren't a homogeneous group. They were a mixture of indigenous Iberians and the ever-expanding seafaring Phoenicians, who brought their advanced trade networks, their knowledge of metallurgy, and their maritime prowess. Around 1100 BC, the Phoenicians began establishing colonies along the southern coast of Iberia, and their influence was soon felt in the Guadalquivir Valley. They were no strangers to trade. They had already established thriving cities such as Carthage and Tyre, but the discovery of the silver-rich lands of Tartessos proved irresistible. The Phoenicians, renowned for their shipbuilding and seafaring skills, would introduce new technologies to the Iberian tribes and begin to exploit the rich mineral resources of the region.
The merging of these two cultures, the indigenous Iberian peoples with their deep connection to the land, and the Phoenicians, with their advanced metallurgical and trading skills, created a new and dynamic civilization. The early Tartessians learned the art of metallurgy from the Phoenicians and began to mine the precious metals that lay hidden in the mountains. The combination of Phoenician expertise in commerce and Iberian knowledge of the land laid the groundwork for the kingdom's success. Tartessos didn't just rise to power by chance. It was a kingdom built on a foundation of wealth, resourcefulness, and strategic positioning. Its location was nothing short of brilliant. The Guadalquivir Valley, with its access to the Mediterranean and Atlantic coasts, allowed the Tartessians to become central players in the ancient trade networks. They could reach the westernmost reaches of the Mediterranean world, from Britain's tin mines to the Carthaginian ports in North Africa, all thanks to their location at the crossroads of the ancient world. But it wasn't just trade that powered Tartessos. It was the wealth beneath the land. The kingdom's silver mines, concentrated in the mountains surrounding the Guadalquivir River, were its greatest asset. Ancient writers, including Herodotus, spoke of Tartessos as a land rich with precious metals. The silver was so abundant that the kingdom became a symbol of wealth across the Mediterranean. King Arganthonius, who ruled during the 6th century BC, was one of the wealthiest monarchs of the time. Under his reign, the city flourished, and the kingdom expanded its influence far beyond the Iberian Peninsula. Tartessos's silver was not only its greatest asset, it was its lifeblood. The city became a hub for trade, and its riches attracted the attention of some of the greatest empires of the ancient world. The Egyptians, Greeks, and even the Phoenicians, who were already masters of trade and metalworking, sought to engage with Tartessos, and its markets became filled with foreign goods from across the Mediterranean world.
The kingdom didn't just trade in precious metals, it traded in culture too. Greek pottery, Egyptian glass, and Phoenician textiles were found alongside Tartessian-made silver jewelry and metalwork. This cultural exchange created a sophisticated urban society. The wealth of Tartessos allowed for the construction of grand palaces and temples, and the city became a beacon of architectural innovation in the ancient world. Under the reign of Arganthonius, who ruled for nearly 40 years, c. 550 BC, the Tartessians experienced their golden age. His long reign was marked not only by economic prosperity, but also by diplomacy. The Tartessians were known for their ability to navigate the complex political landscapes of the Mediterranean, forging alliances and trade agreements that further solidified their dominance. But wealth and power, as history has shown, are often fleeting. Despite its riches, despite its power, the great civilization of Tartessos began to slip into mystery, and its eventual fall would remain one of the greatest enigmas of the ancient world. How could a kingdom so advanced, so prosperous, disappear without a trace? The decline of Tartessos, shrouded in uncertainty, marks the beginning of the kingdom's descent into legend. Was it destroyed by the hands of a foreign empire, such as Carthage, which sought to monopolize the Mediterranean? Was it the Carthaginian expansion that brought Tartessos to its knees, forcing the kingdom to fade from history? Or did it crumble from within, its wealth too great a burden for its rulers, leading to internal strife, corruption, and decay? Some scholars have even suggested that Tartessos may have faded away gradually, its glory dimming until it was no longer remembered, lost to the sands of time. No one knows for sure what happened, and that is part of the mystery that continues to captivate historians and archaeologists alike. But what is undeniable is that Tartessos, once a shining example of Mediterranean wealth and culture, left behind a legacy that still reverberates today. The silver that once flowed like a river beneath the mountains may have dried up, but the story of Tartessos, the story of a kingdom that rose and vanished into the mists of time, remains one of the most captivating tales of the ancient world.
In the heart of southern Spain, the Guadalquivir Valley unfolds like a landscape sculpted by time itself. To the untrained eye, it might seem like a peaceful haven, a river cutting through lush greenery, with the jagged peaks of the Sierra Morena standing guard in the distance. But beneath this serene beauty lay the pulse of Tartessos, a civilization that would come to be defined not by its peaceful valleys, but by the glittering veins of silver that ran through its mountains, silver that would bring immense wealth, and ultimately, a mysterious end. In the 8th century BC, the first Phoenician settlers came to these shores, drawn not just by the beauty of the land, but by the riches hidden beneath the surface. For centuries, the Iberians had lived off the land, but it was the Phoenicians, traders, metallurgists, and seafarers who recognized the potential of the Sierra Morena mountains. They unlocked the treasure buried deep within the rock, silver veins that shimmered like rivers of light beneath the earth. Mining for silver was no easy task. Imagine the labor, the heat, the sound of hammers against stone. The Phoenicians, masters of metallurgy, brought their advanced techniques to the Iberian miners. Deep into the earth they went, breaking through rock with primitive tools, their sweat mixing with the dust of the earth, extracting the precious metal that would change the fate of Tartessos forever. The mining process was grueling. Workers dug tunnels through the mountains, and when they struck silver, it was smelted into ingots, bars of wealth that would fuel the kingdom's rise. Silver flowed into Tartessos like a river of endless possibilities. It wasn't just a metal, it was the key to power, the foundation of an empire. As the mines yielded more silver, the kingdom flourished. Its economy, which was once based on agriculture, was now entirely transformed. The Tartessians were no longer just farmers and fishermen, they were traders, merchants, and artisans, dealing in precious metals and rare goods. The kingdom was rich beyond measure, and its wealth soon became the envy of the Mediterranean.
But silver alone couldn't have elevated Tartessos to such heights. No, the kingdom's true power lay in its strategic position. The Guadalquivir River, with its access to both inland and coastal routes, became the kingdom's vital artery, allowing it to control the flow of goods across the Mediterranean. As the river snaked through the valley, it became the lifeblood of Tartessos's trade, a route for Phoenician merchants, Greek traders, and even Egyptian emissaries. Tartessos became a hub for cultural exchange, its markets filled with exotic goods from across the ancient world. King Arganthonius, who ruled from the mid-6th century BC, recognized the importance of this strategic location. His reign marked the zenith of Tartessian power. Under his guidance, the kingdom forged alliances with powerful Mediterranean empires, including Carthage, Egypt, and the emerging Greek city-states. Arganthonius wasn't just a king, he was a diplomat, navigating the complex web of Mediterranean politics with a shrewdness that ensured the survival and growth of his kingdom. Trade flowed freely into Tartessos, bringing with it Phoenician textiles, Egyptian glass, Greek pottery, and rare spices from the east. In return, Tartessos traded its most valuable commodity, silver. It was a kingdom built on wealth, but it was also a kingdom built on connection. The traders who passed through its markets didn't just exchange goods, they exchanged cultures, philosophies, and technologies. Through these interactions, Tartessos became not just a commercial power, but a cultural melting pot. Ideas and innovations from across the Mediterranean blended with local traditions, creating a rich, vibrant society. The once isolated Iberian tribes had been transformed into a kingdom whose influence stretched far beyond its own borders. As Tartessos rose to power, so too did its treasures. The kingdom wasn't just a center of trade, it was a repository of wealth. The artifacts that remain from this golden age are not just material relics, they are symbols of Tartessos's wealth, culture, and sophistication. The gold and silver jewelry found in royal tombs and the intricately designed bronze weapons tell us about the lives of the kingdom's elites. These artifacts, many adorned with exquisite engravings, often depict gods, heroes, and scenes from everyday life. The golden diadems, rings, and necklaces found in the tombs of the aristocracy speak to the status and power that these individuals held. They were not just wealthy, they were part of a ruling class that saw themselves as chosen by the gods. The gold and silver were symbols of divine favor, bestowed upon them by the very forces that controlled the Mediterranean. Pottery, too, tells a story. The ceramic urns and vases, decorated with scenes from Greek mythology and Tartessian daily life, give us a glimpse into the cultural exchange that took place in Tartessos. These pieces of art reveal a civilization deeply connected to the wider Mediterranean world, even as it retained its unique identity. And it wasn't just the common folk who created these beautiful works. These were the finest artisans who crafted objects that were not just functional, but beautiful, sacred, and symbolic. The weapons uncovered in Tartessos further underscore its wealth and power. Bronze swords, iron daggers, and shield bosses, many still beautifully decorated with intricate designs, speak to the military strength that the kingdom needed to protect its wealth and maintain its influence. The weapons weren't just tools for battle, they were also items of prestige, displayed proudly by the aristocracy to show their power and authority. In the tombs of the Tartessian elites, these treasures were buried, sometimes alongside their owners, perhaps as offerings to the gods, or as a means of taking their wealth with them into the afterlife. These artifacts, still unearthed by archaeologists today, offer a tantalizing glimpse into the material culture of a kingdom that, despite its incredible wealth, would eventually vanish, leaving behind only these silent relics. Tartessos had risen, its power and wealth built on silver that flowed like a river from the mountains. Its influence stretched across the Mediterranean, a jewel of prosperity and culture. But wealth, as history has shown, is a double-edged sword. It blinds and intoxicates, leaving civilizations vulnerable to decay from within. It was not an enemy that first shook the foundations of Tartessos, it was complacency.
In the mid-6th century BC, Tartessos seemed untouchable. The silver mines in the Sierra Morena were at their peak, and the kingdom had established its dominance over Mediterranean trade routes. But as the riches piled up, something far more subtle began to erode the kingdom's power: internal division. The very thing that made Tartessos strong, its wealth, became the source of its weakness. The ruling elite, who once worked together to expand their kingdom's influence, began to fracture, consumed by greed and political rivalry. The succession after King Arganthonius, who had ruled for nearly 40 years, was marred by disputes and infighting. Once a symbol of unity, the royal court had become a battleground for power. The noble families, long accustomed to the luxuries their wealth provided, began to view the kingdom less as a unified entity and more as a prize to be claimed. Arganthonius's death left a vacuum that no one could fill, and what followed was a bitter struggle for control. The once solid foundation of Tartessos began to crack, the political elite too consumed by power struggles to notice the growing threats that loomed at their borders. Even as internal strife simmered, Carthage, the rising powerhouse of the Western Mediterranean, had already begun eyeing the riches of Tartessos. Carthage, a city built on trade and military might, saw the Tartessian silver mines as an opportunity to expand its own empire. And what did they see in Tartessos? A rival. As Carthage expanded, it sought to control the wealth of Iberia, and the silver of Tartessos stood in the way of that goal.
The presence of the Carthaginians in the region was more than just a trade competition. It was a political maneuver. The Carthaginians knew that controlling Iberia's silver would give them unparalleled power over the Mediterranean. Tartessos, with its once secured dominance, was now in danger. Carthage's ambitions to monopolize Mediterranean trade led them to challenge Tartessos' hold over the crucial Guadalquivir River and its resources. The Phoenician presence, long associated with Tartessos, was now being overshadowed by Carthaginian expansion. The question becomes, did Carthage seek to destroy Tartessos, or did they simply see it as a competitor to be outmaneuvered? What is clear, however, is that the Carthaginian presence in Iberia was growing, and the Tartessians found themselves no longer the dominant power in the Mediterranean, but rather a vulnerable civilization under siege from both internal collapse and external rivals. The silver that once brought power now became a catalyst for Tartessos' fall. The kingdom's elite, wrapped in their wealth, grew detached from the needs of their people. The political climate shifted from one of unity and mutual benefit to competition and corruption. The rulers became more concerned with their own power and prosperity than with the well-being of the kingdom. Factionalism began to tear the kingdom apart. As the leaders bickered for control, the common people, who once benefited from the wealth, found themselves increasingly oppressed. What had been a kingdom of shared prosperity was now a place where wealth was concentrated in the hands of a few, and the rest of the population languished.
What happened within the walls of Tartessos? Greed, corruption, and betrayal. The very power that had made Tartessos great, the silver, became a burden. As the nobility focused on hoarding their riches, the kingdom's political system weakened. Civil unrest began to spread. The luxuries enjoyed by the elites were paid for by the exploitation of the laborers working in the mines and fields. The kingdom's wealth was no longer a blessing, but a weight too heavy to bear. As political intrigue flourished in the royal courts, the common people began to rise in discontent. The unity that once marked Tartessos' success had been replaced by infighting and disillusionment. Could the riches of Tartessos have led to its downfall? The evidence points to this. When wealth is hoarded by the few and political strife takes root, even the mightiest empire can crumble.
The night descended over Tartessos, and with it, an eerie silence fell across the once vibrant city. The streets, which had once been filled with merchants and traders bustling to and fro, now lay deserted, their cobblestones worn by the weight of an empire teetering on the edge. The markets that had echoed with the voices of commerce were eerily still. The familiar scent of spice, salt, and the ocean was absent from the air, replaced by a stifling heaviness that seemed to settle in the very soil. Tartessos, for so long the jewel of the western Mediterranean, now felt like a kingdom in decline. The silver, once so abundant, now seemed like a distant memory. The mines in the Sierra Morena, the source of the kingdom's wealth, lay dormant, underworked and underfunded. The Guadalquivir River, which had once flowed as a river of prosperity, now seemed sluggish, its waters reflecting a dull, almost melancholy light. The grand palaces, the shining halls of the elite, stood silent, their once vibrant banners now frayed and faded. Outside the walls of Tartessos, the great natural barrier of the Sierra Morena still loomed, but it offered no protection. The once mighty defenses of the kingdom were now worn thin. In the distance, the faint silhouette of a fleet could be seen on the horizon. Carthaginian ships, their sails taut in the wind, drawing ever closer. The Carthaginians were coming, but it was the betrayal within the kingdom that had already done the most damage.
It wasn't the first attack that marked the fall of Tartessos, but rather the quiet, insidious collapse that started from within. The elite of Tartessos, once so united in their pursuit of wealth, had now become fractured, each faction eyeing the silver and power that flowed through the kingdom. In the years following the death of King Arganthonius in 550 BC, the political landscape had become a battleground of greed and ambition. The kingdom that had once been a beacon of unity and strength was now caught in a deadly game of internal power struggles. The first real crack in the kingdom's foundation came when Tartessos's nobility, faced with uncertainty after Arganthonius's long reign, began to splinter. The ruling families, each eager to claim a portion of the wealth, began to turn on one another. Once, the Tartessian elite had acted as one, but now their individual ambitions overshadowed any sense of unity. The royal succession crisis deepened as different factions vied for control, their leaders more focused on their personal power than the well-being of the kingdom. Amidst the growing political instability, the Carthaginians, whose influence in the Mediterranean had been expanding steadily, saw an opportunity. The once proud kingdom of Tartessos, once the dominant power of the Iberian Peninsula, was now weakened by division, and Carthage wasted no time in moving in. But it wasn't the Carthaginian fleet that brought about the kingdom's immediate downfall. No, it was betrayal, the kind that runs so deep it rots the very soul of an empire. Internal alliances were made in the shadows. In exchange for Carthaginian military support, a faction of the Tartessian elite secretly promised the Carthaginians access to the kingdom's most prized resource, the silver mines of the Sierra Morena. They betrayed their own people, bartering their kingdom's lifeblood for the promise of power.
When this secret pact was uncovered, it sent shockwaves through the kingdom. Carthage, now emboldened, began to move with purpose. The Tartessian people, already disillusioned by the infighting within their ruling class, reacted with fury. The streets of Tartessos, that had once hummed with the bustle of traders, now reverberated with the cries of the oppressed. Their anger directed not just at external invaders, but at those within the kingdom who had allowed it to happen. By the time the Carthaginian fleet arrived on the horizon, Tartessos was already a kingdom in disarray. The betrayal of its elite had left it vulnerable,
and the Carthaginians seized the moment. They did not come to simply pillage, they came to control. The once thriving city was now besieged, not by a foreign army at its gates, but by the rotting core of its own power structure. What remained of the kingdom's strength, once built on the wealth of silver, now lay in tatters. The elite, having secured their private deals with the enemy, were more concerned with saving their wealth than with defending the kingdom. Their power had been built on the trade routes, but now those same routes were blocked, and their commerce stalled. The Carthaginians moved swiftly, taking control of the silver mines and sealing their grip on the very thing that had given Tartessos its power. And as the kingdom crumbled under the weight of its own betrayal, the Tartessian people were left with nothing: no leader, no defense, no hope. The final blow came swiftly. Tartessos, once the greatest power in the Western Mediterranean, was lost. Its wealth, its glory, its legacy, swallowed by the sands of time. What had been a kingdom of riches became a shadow of its former self, an empire that fell not to an outside force, but to its own greed and the divisions sown within.
The fate of Tartessos has intrigued historians for centuries. Once a civilization so rich in silver, power, and trade, it was a kingdom that seemed to have it all. But how could it collapse so suddenly, vanishing into the mists of time? The answers are elusive, and the theories are many. Could Tartessos have been destroyed by an external force, perhaps the rising power of Carthage? Or did the kingdom's own internal fractures tear it apart? Did the natural world turn against the kingdom, delivering a cataclysmic blow? As we look back through the sands of history, we see several possible explanations, each with its own shadow of doubt. What caused the once thriving civilization to slip into the shadows, leaving behind only the whispers of its greatness? One theory points to the rise of Carthage, the growing power to the east, as the catalyst for Tartessos' downfall. By the 5th century BC, Carthage, with its vast naval empire and mercantile reach, was carving its own empire across the Mediterranean. But its expansion couldn't go unchecked, and Tartessos, with its wealth of silver, was one prize Carthage could not afford to ignore. The kingdom's dominance in the silver trade made it a target, and its strategic location along the Guadalquivir River gave it the power to control a significant trade route. Carthage had already expanded into the Western Mediterranean, and Tartessos stood as a rival in the growing contest for trade supremacy. Tartessos may have seemed untouchable, but the kingdom had its vulnerabilities. The Carthaginians, ever the tacticians, may have viewed Tartessos as an obstacle that needed to be removed. By 500 BC, Carthaginian fleets were patrolling the Mediterranean with increasing frequency, their ships casting long shadows over the once dominant Tartessos. But did Carthage destroy Tartessos outright? Or was the kingdom already weakened by internal strife before Carthage arrived? It's unclear. What is certain is that Carthage's growing influence in the region may have acted as the final nail in the coffin for a kingdom already at the brink.
While the theories of foreign invasions and rivalry are compelling, some historians suggest a more devastating, natural explanation. Could Tartessos have been destroyed by a natural disaster? The ancient world was no stranger to the forces of nature. Earthquakes, floods, and storms have all left their mark on civilizations throughout history. The Guadalquivir River, central to the kingdom's life and commerce, was a vital artery for trade. But could it have become a deadly force? Flooding was not uncommon in the Mediterranean basin, and the river's unpredictable shifts may have caused catastrophic damage. If flooding had overwhelmed the fertile lands around Tartessos, or if the river's course changed drastically, it could have devastated agriculture, trade, and the economy, all pillars of Tartessos' wealth. The possibility of an earthquake also looms large. The Sierra Morena Mountains, with their jagged peaks, were a geological feature that could have been prone to seismic activity. Could an earthquake have struck suddenly, leveling buildings, destroying infrastructure, and crippling the kingdom? Some ancient sources even suggest that Tartessos was swallowed by the earth, a metaphor that may indicate the suddenness of such a disaster. But a natural disaster alone doesn't explain why Tartessos fell as quickly as it did. While it may have been a significant factor in the kingdom's decline, the internal political instability and division likely played a far greater role in the eventual collapse. Perhaps the most compelling theory, one that ties into both external threats and natural disasters, is the internal corruption and decay that crippled Tartessos long before any external force could strike. The kingdom's wealth, which had once been a unifying force, eventually turned into its greatest vulnerability.
The noble families of Tartessos, once the pillars of the kingdom, began to grow increasingly disconnected from the common people. The wealth from the silver mines of Sierra Morena flowed into the hands of the elites, and the aristocracy became more focused on expanding their own fortunes rather than safeguarding the future of their civilization. The ruling families began to fight amongst themselves, each faction eager to secure its own power at the expense of the kingdom's unity. The death of King Arganthonius in 550 BC, after a long and prosperous reign, marked the beginning of this decay. His long reign had unified Tartessos, but with his death, a power vacuum emerged. The kingdom's elite, no longer bound by a strong central authority, began to bicker over succession. The infighting amongst the ruling families weakened the political structure of the kingdom, and the once strong monarchy gave way to factions, each more concerned with personal gain than with the well-being of the kingdom. This growing division made Tartessos vulnerable to foreign influences, particularly from Carthage, which saw an opportunity to gain control of the kingdom's wealth. Some historians believe that internal corruption, particularly the betrayal of the kingdom's silver resources to Carthage, sealed Tartessos's fate. Elites, in exchange for personal power, may have handed over the kingdom's vital resources to a foreign power, leaving the kingdom exposed to Carthaginian control. This act of betrayal, committed by the very people who were supposed to protect Tartessos, was the final blow to a kingdom already riddled with internal weakness. Was King Arganthonius responsible for the fall of Tartessos? Could his long reign, which left the kingdom both prosperous and complacent, have set the stage for the collapse? Though Arganthonius was a beloved king, it's possible that his failure to secure succession or address internal corruption weakened the kingdom in the long run.
Under Arganthonius, Tartessos had flourished. His diplomatic skill and ability to maintain peace with the Phoenicians and Greeks helped the kingdom thrive. But as his reign came to an end, Tartessos found itself unprepared for the challenges ahead. The lack of a clear successor, coupled with the rise of factionalism within the elite, set the stage for a power struggle that would leave the kingdom vulnerable to external forces. Did Arganthonius have the foresight to see that his kingdom needed a strong, unified leadership to withstand the pressures that would follow his death? His failure to address the growing political division and the internal corruption within his court left a fractured kingdom that struggled to maintain its dominance in the Mediterranean. The story of Tartessos is one that has been passed down through centuries, not just by the people who lived it, but by those who sought to understand it from the outside. Ancient texts, filled with echoes of myth and legend, paint a picture of a kingdom full of wealth, power, and mystery. But as with all ancient tales, the reality is far more elusive. How did this mighty civilization, once a beacon of prosperity in the Mediterranean, fall so suddenly, so completely, and so mysteriously? The theories vary, but one thing remains certain. Tartessos is a kingdom that never truly revealed its secrets, even in its demise. What we know about Tartessos comes from a mix of ancient writings and modern archaeological investigation. But even with all the advances in technology and research, the mystery still lingers. Today, we are left with the task of piecing together the fragments of its history, using the accounts of ancient historians, modern findings, and emerging theories. How much of the ancient world can we truly understand?
To understand Tartessos, we first turn to the ancient historians who provided some of the earliest insights into the kingdom's existence. Herodotus, known as the father of history, is one of the first to mention Tartessos in his famous work Hesperides around 450 BC. Though his account is brief, Herodotus describes a kingdom that was rich beyond measure, its rivers filled with gold and silver, and its people living in prosperity. According to him, Tartessos was a land of immense wealth, its treasure so abundant that it caught the attention of not only Greece but also Egypt. He also recounts stories of Phoenician traders exchanging their wares for Tartessian silver, a kingdom that was both a center of commerce and a powerful force in its time. Herodotus, however, also mixes legend with fact, making it difficult to distinguish the truth from embellishment. His description of Tartessos as a place where golden treasures flowed freely leaves us wondering how much of this wealth was mythologized. Was Tartessos really as rich as he described, or had time transformed it into a mythical place woven with the threads of ancient tales? Another important figure in the study of Tartessos is Strabo, the Greek geographer who wrote in the 1st century AD. Unlike Herodotus, Strabo had a more measured approach, focusing on the geography and political landscape of the Mediterranean. In his geography, Strabo notes that by his time, Tartessos had long since faded into obscurity, its capital in ruins, its people forgotten. He mentions the Sierra Morena as the source of the kingdom's wealth, and suggests that the Guadalquivir River was central to its success as a trade route. Yet, like Herodotus, Strabo too describes the kingdom's disappearance as shrouded in mystery. Tartessos, he writes, no longer exists as it once did, consumed by time and neglect.
Both Herodotus and Strabo provide tantalizing glimpses into the world of Tartessos. But their writings leave us with far more questions than answers. Tartessos, to them, was already a legend by the time they wrote about it, a place of myth and rumor, its true fate obscured by time. How much of what they said was based on fact, and how much on imagination? While ancient writings provide us with clues, modern archaeology has been the key to unlocking the secrets of Tartessos. For centuries, the kingdom's ruins remained a mystery, with many scholars unsure of its exact location. But in recent decades, archaeological investigations have begun to shine new light on the once great civilization. In 2015, a significant discovery was made near the modern town of Trebujina, close to the Guadalquivir River. Archaeologists uncovered a wealth of artifacts, including silver jewelry, bronze objects, and pottery, many of which were clearly influenced by Phoenician craftsmanship, pointing to the trade connections between Tartessos and the wider Mediterranean world. These findings suggest that Tartessos was indeed a highly developed society with access to advanced materials and techniques, and its role as a cultural crossroads in the ancient world is now undeniable. What these discoveries also highlight is just how far-reaching Tartessos's influence was. Items unearthed in the region show evidence of long-distance trade, not just with neighboring civilizations like Carthage and the Phoenicians, but with the farthest corners of the Mediterranean, including Greece and Egypt. The trade routes that once connected Tartessos to the rest of the ancient world are becoming clearer, and this new evidence helps paint a picture of a prosperous kingdom at the heart of Mediterranean commerce.
But these findings, impressive as they are, only raise more questions. What happened to this thriving city? How could a kingdom so wealthy and so strategically placed simply vanish? Tartessos' disappearance remains one of the greatest enigmas in history. And while modern archaeology has brought new insights into the kingdom's culture and commerce, the cause of its fall is still shrouded in mystery. Today, archaeologists use more than just traditional tools to uncover the secrets of Tartessos. Modern technology has opened up new possibilities for exploring the lost kingdom. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, is being used to map out the hidden remains of Tartessian settlements that lie buried beneath the surface. This non-invasive technology allows researchers to scan large areas without disturbing the land, revealing structures and roads that had previously been invisible to the naked eye. Satellite imagery is also playing a key role in uncovering the kingdom's layout. By studying the patterns in the landscape from above, archaeologists have been able to identify possible locations of Tartessos' lost cities. Tartessos may have been larger and more expansive than previously thought, with its cities spread out over a wide area, connected by a complex network of roads and waterways. In addition to GPR and satellite imaging, isotope analysis has become an invaluable tool in studying ancient artifacts. By analyzing the chemical signatures in pottery and other materials, researchers can trace their origins, providing clues about trade routes and external influences. This cutting-edge technique has revealed the extent of Tartessos' trade relationships, offering evidence of contact with civilizations from across the Mediterranean. These modern tools are providing us with a more detailed and accurate understanding of Tartessos, but they also highlight the scale of the challenge facing historians. Tartessos' ruins are scattered, and many of its most important sites have been lost to time, buried under centuries of sediment. Even with the advances of modern technology, the full story of Tartessos' fall remains hidden, a riddle waiting to be solved.
Even with all the technological advancements and archaeological discoveries, the question of what happened to Tartessos remains elusive. Could it have been destroyed by external forces, such as a Carthaginian invasion? Or did it collapse due to internal corruption, its elite factions tearing it apart from within? Some historians suggest that Tartessos was simply the victim of nature's wrath, struck by a disaster like an earthquake or flood, which may have disrupted the kingdom's economy and infrastructure. Perhaps, like many great civilizations before it, Tartessos was brought down by a combination of factors: greed, internal division, and the rise of stronger external powers. Or perhaps, as some suggest, it simply faded into legend, its downfall a quiet one, marked by the slow erosion of its power. One thing is clear: the mystery of Tartessos is far from solved. As new discoveries are made and new technologies bring us closer to the truth, the kingdom's fall remains an unsolved puzzle, one that continues to captivate the imagination of historians, archaeologists, and storytellers alike.
The tale of Tartessos is as much a myth as it is history, a story whose wealth, mystery, and final disappearance have sparked the imagination of civilizations for centuries. But how much of this legend is rooted in reality? As the kingdom's riches, its silver, gold, and precious metals, flowed across the Mediterranean, they caught the attention of traders, historians, and even myth-makers. The fame of Tartessos spread far beyond the borders of Iberia, inspiring legends that continue to echo through time. The connection between Tartessos and the Greek myths, particularly the story of the Hesperides, the mythical garden where golden apples grew, suggests that the kingdom's real wealth inspired stories that blurred the line between fact and fantasy. But how did Tartessos, a real kingdom that flourished along the Guadalquivir River in modern-day Spain, find its way into the pages of Greek mythology? The answer lies in the nature of wealth itself, how it can inspire both awe and myth, and how a kingdom's riches can transform into stories of unimaginable power and temptation. The myth of the Hesperides, daughters of night, guarding the golden apples in a secret garden, is one of the most famous and enduring stories in Greek mythology. In the tale, the golden apples, bestowed by Hera as a wedding gift to Zeus, grant immortality, a symbol of unattainable wealth. The garden, described as being located at the edge of the world, is often depicted as a paradise, rich with golden fruit and surrounded by nymphs who fiercely protect its treasure. But what inspired this legend? Could the golden apples of Greek mythology have been based on a real place, a kingdom that, in the eyes of the ancients, seemed to possess riches beyond imagination? The wealth of Tartessos, particularly its gold and silver, may have served as the basis for the Hesperides myth. Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian, famously described Tartessos as a land of incredible wealth, where the Guadalquivir River flowed with precious metals, and where the ruling class had access to unimaginable riches. The kingdom's silver and gold were so abundant that they seemed to echo the golden apples, a symbol of the earth's bounty and the promise of immortality.
But was it just gold that inspired these stories, or was there something more at play here? The concept of guarded treasures, things that were so rare, so valuable that they could not be touched by mere mortals, seems to reflect not just gold, but a sense of the unattainable, something beyond reach. The Hesperides were tasked with protecting something too precious to be claimed. Similarly, the wealth of Tartessos was coveted by many. Its silver was the lifeblood of the kingdom, but it was not easily won. Just as the golden apples were kept under lock and key, so too was Tartessos's wealth, a treasure that could only be obtained by those who had the power to take it. The connection between the Hesperides and Tartessos lies not just in the riches of gold, but in the mystique of a land that seemed to hold secrets, treasures that few could truly understand. Could the Hesperides garden be a symbolic reflection of Tartessos itself, a place where the treasures of the earth were so abundant, so coveted, that they transcended mere reality and became myth? As Greek traders and Phoenician sailors made their way to the shores of Iberia, they encountered a kingdom unlike any other. The tales they brought back to their homelands were filled with exaggerated stories of endless riches, of cities glistening with golden statues, of rivers flowing with silver. It wasn't long before Tartessos was no longer just a city, it was a legend, a paradise where wealth was in abundance. The myth of the golden apples is just one example of how Tartessos's riches fueled the imagination of the ancient world. As word spread, Tartessos became more than just a kingdom. It became a symbol of ultimate wealth. The golden apples guarded by the Hesperides reflected the allure of a worldly treasure that could never be fully attained. And just like the Hesperides, who kept the golden apples hidden away, so too was Tartessos's wealth, a treasure that could only be obtained by those who had the power to take it.
And it wasn't just the gold of Tartessos that inspired myth. The kingdom's prosperity and its role as a cultural and trade hub made it the perfect subject for mythmakers. Greek and Phoenician traders who crossed paths with the Tartessians were likely amazed by the sheer abundance they encountered. They passed these stories down, each retelling more extravagant than the last. In the fertile Guadalquivir Valley, the Tartessian people seemed to have found a paradise, one that transcended the mundane and became a place of legend. While Tartessos's wealth undoubtedly inspired stories of golden apples and hidden treasures, there was also a darker side to these legends. The allure of the golden fruit represented not just wealth, but temptation, a force that, once desired, could lead to ruin. This tension between wealth and destruction is reflected in the story of Heracles' quest to retrieve the golden apples from the Hesperides. Despite all his strength, he was not immune to the dangers of seeking something too powerful, something too tempting to possess. The myth teaches us that even the pursuit of wealth and immortality comes at a cost. Could this theme, the destructive nature of unchecked wealth, have had its origins in Tartessos? Was the kingdom's abundance of riches ultimately its downfall? Much like Heracles faced challenges in retrieving the golden apples, Tartessos may have found that the very wealth that made it a powerful and prosperous kingdom also invited destruction. The legends that grew up around the kingdom speak to this duality, the riches that could bring glory and ruin in equal measure. Perhaps the Hesperides myth isn't just a tale of a garden of gold, but a reflection of Tartessos' own rise and fall, a civilization so rich in wealth, yet so vulnerable to the pressures of greed, envy, and the pursuit of power. The golden apples represent not just treasure, but temptation, a force that, when sought after recklessly, can lead to destruction.
In the end, the story of Tartessos is one of transformation, from real kingdom to legendary treasure. Its golden apples may have been inspired by the kingdom's real wealth, but the stories surrounding them grew into something much larger than life. Tartessos, a kingdom that once dominated the Mediterranean, became a symbol of both treasure and tragedy, inspiring myths that have lasted for millennia. Today, Tartessos is no longer a living kingdom, but its riches live on, woven into the fabric of mythology and legend. Its story is one that continues to captivate, not just for the truth it holds, but for the mystery that remains unsolved. What really happened to Tartessos? Was its fall inevitable, a consequence of greed and internal strife? Or did its wealth simply become too much to handle, drawing the kingdom into a mythical demise? The kingdom may be gone, but its legacy, its golden apples, will live on, forever intertwined with the legends that grew from the true story of Tartessos, the kingdom of gold. For centuries, Tartessos existed only in the pages of ancient texts, passed down through myth and the fragmented accounts of Herodotus and Strabo. The kingdom's golden riches, its trade networks, and its mysterious disappearance faded into the dust of time. But in the 20th century, a series of remarkable discoveries would begin to unravel the long-lost history of Tartessos, revealing a civilization whose wealth and influence had once reached across the Mediterranean, and whose final days remain shrouded in mystery.
The rediscovery of Tartessos did not happen overnight, nor did it come from a single breakthrough. Instead, it was a slow and meticulous process, a series of excavations and findings that gradually peeled away the layers of history, bringing Tartessos back into the light. But how did modern archaeologists first stumble upon the ruins of a kingdom that had been forgotten for centuries? And what artifacts, what treasures did they unearth that have changed our understanding of this enigmatic civilization? The first major breakthrough came in the 1920s when archaeologists began to focus on the region surrounding the Guadalquivir River in southern Spain. For years, there had been rumors of ancient cities buried beneath the earth, stories passed down from locals who claimed to have found strange, weathered artifacts and ruins in the hills. But it wasn't until the early 20th century, with the rise of more sophisticated archaeological methods, that serious excavations began in earnest. The region was rich with ancient history, but Tartessos itself remained elusive. It wasn't until the 1950s, however, that major excavations in the Trebujena and Hinojos areas began to uncover tangible evidence of Tartessos's presence. The first signs of the lost kingdom were faint, fragments of pottery, tools, and jewelry. But it wasn't until archaeologists focused their attention on the area near the Guadalquivir River that the true extent of Tartessos's past began to emerge. In the 1960s, a series of excavations in the southern Spanish region of Andalusia revealed the first significant findings that could be definitively tied to Tartessos. Here, ancient coins, bearing strange and unfamiliar symbols, were unearthed, suggesting the kingdom's active involvement in trade and its connection with neighboring Mediterranean powers like Carthage and the Phoenicians. Tartessos, it seemed, had been far more than just a myth. It was a real, thriving civilization, its traces scattered across the Iberian Peninsula.
As archaeologists continued to dig deeper into the Tartessian landscape, they began to unearth remarkable objects, artifacts that painted a vivid picture of life in the kingdom. These finds would not only confirm the historical existence of Tartessos, but would challenge many of the early assumptions about the civilization. One of the most significant discoveries was a large cache of jewelry made from gold and silver found in Trebujena. The intricate designs of these pieces, many featuring Phoenician influence, were clearly symbols of wealth and status. The Tartessian people, once believed to be isolated from other ancient Mediterranean cultures, were shown to have been deeply interconnected with Phoenicians, Greeks, and even Egyptians. These golden and silver treasures were evidence of a civilization with a high degree of craftsmanship, artistry, and access to resources that allowed them to trade and prosper. Among the most mysterious finds were the inscriptions discovered on ancient stone tablets. These texts, written in an unfamiliar script, hinted at a society that valued communication and record-keeping, suggesting a level of sophistication that had been previously underestimated. The Tartessian language, though still not fully understood, offered a glimpse into the kingdom's unique identity, distinct yet connected to the wider Mediterranean world. But perhaps the most striking discoveries were the remnants of buildings that began to emerge from the earth in the 1970s. Archaeologists unearthed the foundations of stone structures which they believed to be the remains of Tartessos's ancient capital. These buildings, though in ruins, revealed sophisticated architecture, walled courtyards, monumental gates, and even hints of temples. The sheer scale of these structures suggested that Tartessos was a kingdom of considerable power and prestige, one whose influence stretched far beyond the confines of its own territory.
The discoveries of the past century have not only uncovered the real existence of Tartessos, but have also challenged long-standing assumptions about the civilization. For years, historians had viewed Tartessos as a mythic kingdom, its golden apples and vast riches relegated to the realm of legend. The first archaeological findings in the 20th century dispelled this view, revealing a civilization that was not just rich, but highly connected and influential in the ancient Mediterranean world. The golden jewelry, coins, and inscriptions suggest that Tartessos was not an isolated society, as once believed, but a kingdom that participated actively in the broader Mediterranean trade network. Its connections with the Phoenicians, in particular, were far more significant than early historians had realized. Tartessos's access to precious metals from the Sierra Morena Mountains allowed it to dominate trade in the western Mediterranean, making it a powerful force in the region. Perhaps most surprising, however, was the discovery of Tartessos's architecture, large stone structures that hinted at a society with not only great wealth, but also advanced engineering and architectural knowledge. These buildings suggest that Tartessos was not simply a group of tribal societies, as had once been assumed, but rather a complex civilization capable of monumental construction.
The Tartessians were no mere myth. They were real people, living in a kingdom that, at its height,
had the wealth, influence, and cultural exchanges of the greatest civilizations of the ancient world. And while we can never fully know the fate of Tartessos, the discoveries made in the last century have transformed our understanding of this once great kingdom, bringing it out of the realm of legend and into the realm of history. Despite the significant breakthroughs, much about Tartessos remains shrouded in mystery. Although archaeologists have uncovered evidence of the kingdom's wealth and cultural influence, the cause of its fall still eludes us. Was it internal strife, natural disaster, or external invasion that brought about its collapse? The Carthaginian rise seems to have played a role, but how exactly Carthage affected Tartessos, whether through conquest, trade rivalry, or political intrigue, is still a matter of debate. Additionally, while the Tartessian language offers intriguing insights into the culture, it remains only partially understood. The inscriptions found on stone tablets continued to be deciphered, but many of the details about their religion, governance, and daily life remain elusive. As more excavation sites are explored, new clues may emerge, but the mystery of Tartessos's final days remains a subject of great intrigue. As the centuries have passed, the once great kingdom of Tartessos has faded into the mist of history, its palaces and temples consumed by time. The river that once flowed with silver and gold, and the bustling marketplaces where traders from the Mediterranean converged, have all but disappeared. But even as the physical remnants of Tartessos slowly disappear into the earth, its legacy endures, silent, yet ever present in the cultures that followed. Tartessos, in a sense, still exists, woven into the fabric of history, its influence rippling across time, quietly shaping the course of civilizations long after its fall. Its wealth, its trade networks, and its contributions to metalworking left marks that would not be easily erased. But more than that, the stories of Tartessos, its golden treasures, its glittering riches, and its sudden, mysterious end became the stuff of myths and legends. And perhaps it's in these myths that we find the true heart of Tartessos, not just as it was, but as it was remembered long after its cities crumbled. What is the connection between the mythical and the historical in the case of Tartessos? Could the legends of its wealth and sudden disappearance be more than just stories passed down through time? Could they be the preserved memory of a civilization so grand, so legendary, that it could not be forgotten, even as its physical presence vanished from the world? To understand this, we must look at Tartessos's lasting impact, not just in history, but in the myths it inspired, the trade it facilitated, and the metalworking techniques it passed down. These are the true legacies of a civilization whose end was as dramatic as its rise. As we continue to piece together the fragments of Tartessos, we see not just a kingdom that was lost, but one whose influence continues to echo through the centuries.
Despite the loss of Tartessos itself, its impact on the Mediterranean world remains undeniable. Its influence reached far beyond the shores of the Guadalquivir River, rippling across trade routes and shaping the development of surrounding civilizations. At its peak, Tartessos was a key player in the Mediterranean trade network, serving as a crossroads for cultures from the east and west. The Sierra Morena Mountains, rich in gold and silver, were the foundation of Tartessos's wealth. The kingdom's mastery over metalworking was unrivaled, and its craftsmanship in precious metals would leave a lasting imprint on the Mediterranean world. The Phoenicians, the Greeks, and later the Carthaginians would all come into contact with Tartessos, eager to trade and acquire the treasures that flowed from its mines. For centuries, Tartessos's gold and silver were prized commodities, fueling the economic engines of the Mediterranean. And though the Tartessians themselves vanished, the metalworking techniques they developed were passed on.
Phoenician sailors and traders brought these methods to the far reaches of the Mediterranean, from Carthage to Greece, ensuring that the legacy of Tartessos' metalworkers lived on. The elaborate jewelry, the coins, and the artifacts discovered in modern-day Spain speak to the remarkable skill of Tartessos' craftsmen, skill that would continue to influence the ancient world for centuries after the kingdom's fall. Even more remarkable, however, is how Tartessos' influence didn't just fade away with the fall of its cities. The Carthaginians, who inherited much of Tartessos' wealth and land, became the heirs to its trading routes and to its artistic knowledge. Tartessos' importance as a trade hub, both for goods and for cultural exchange, endured even after the kingdom itself was lost to the annals of time.
As Tartessos passed into the shadows of myth, its riches and power began to morph into something more than just historical fact. The tale of the golden apples of the Hesperides, the mythical garden where Hera's apples, imbued with the power of immortality, were guarded by nymphs, became one of the most enduring symbols of Tartessos' riches. In the ancient world, where wealth was a sign of immortality and divine favor, it is easy to see how Tartessos' golden treasures could have inspired such a myth. The Hesperides were not merely guardians of fruit. They represented the ultimate reward for those brave enough to embark on a quest to claim something beyond the reach of mortals. In this sense, the myth of the golden apples mirrored Tartessos itself. The kingdom's gold and silver were so vast, so coveted, that they seemed beyond the realm of human possibility. The legends of Tartessos, of treasure that could make one immortal, may have been inspired by the very real wealth that flowed through the kingdom. Could these myths be based on real events? Were the golden apples of Greek mythology merely a metaphor for the treasures of Tartessos, its gold, its silver, its immeasurable wealth? We know that Herodotus and Strabo, the ancient historians, wrote about the kingdom's treasure, describing it as an almost mythical abundance. The Hesperides, in this sense, are less a fairy tale and more a reflection of a world where wealth was so great it could not be comprehended by those who lived outside its borders. Tales of Tartessos' riches were transformed into myths not because they were entirely fabricated, but because the wealth of the kingdom was so extraordinary that it became legendary. The golden apples, though they may not have existed in the physical world, were a symbol of something real, a kingdom so rich and so powerful that it defied the bounds of mortal understanding.
But Tartessos is more than just a legendary kingdom of gold. The myth of its golden apples is only one part of a much larger story. As the kingdom faded, its wealth, trade, and metalworking innovations were absorbed into the fabric of the Mediterranean world. Tartessos, though physically lost, continued to influence those who followed. When Carthage rose to power, it took much from Tartessos, not just its gold, but its trade routes, its cultural knowledge, and its metalworking skills. The Phoenicians, who had long traded with Tartessos, were instrumental in passing on the kingdom's artistic and technological advances. And as the Greeks began to establish their presence in the Mediterranean, they too were influenced by the kingdom's legacy. Even though Tartessos itself no longer stood, the golden age it had briefly enjoyed reverberated through the cultures that succeeded it. The myths surrounding the kingdom, the legends of its treasure, of its sudden disappearance, continued to shape the imaginations of generations to come. The story of Tartessos wasn't just the story of a lost kingdom. It was the story of a cultural influence that endured, whispering through the winds of time, echoing across the Mediterranean world. The story of Tartessos begins to fade into the shadows of time. The once great kingdom, whose golden wealth and strategic influence shaped the Mediterranean world, has vanished, leaving behind only whispers in the annals of history. Its ancient cities,
once thriving with trade, metalworking, and cultural exchange, now lie buried beneath the earth, their memories carried forward only by the myths and legends passed down through generations.
But as we stand at the crossroads of history, looking back at this mysterious kingdom, we must ask ourselves, was Tartessos simply a lost civilization, doomed to fade into obscurity? Or could it have been the beginning of something much larger, a civilization that, while short-lived, planted the seeds for an entirely new era in the Mediterranean? How did this kingdom, with all its wealth and influence, vanish so quickly? Was it a victim of its own greed or ambition, or was it torn apart by external forces beyond its control? What caused this once flourishing empire to fall? These questions are the threads that weave the tale of Tartessos, a civilization whose story is not just lost in time, but hidden in the stories of wealth, power, and tragic demise. Perhaps it was the fate of Tartessos to burn brightly, a kingdom so full of promise and riches that its end had to be equally dramatic. But was it inevitable? Or could Tartessos have endured, becoming one of the great Mediterranean empires, if only circumstances had been different? Tartessos rose to prominence as a kingdom of immense wealth, its silver mines and golden treasures a magnet for traders, invaders, and adventurers alike. But its fall was just as swift as its rise. The once flourishing kingdom became a shadow of itself, fading into myth as its secrets were slowly buried beneath layers of time. What could have led to its destruction? Theories abound. Was it the Carthaginian expansion, pushing against the borders of Tartessos, seeking to seize its vital trade routes and precious resources? Was it the internal strife, the division among the ruling elite, that caused the kingdom's collapse? Or was it the forces of nature, perhaps an earthquake, a flood, or the shifting of the Guadalquivir River, that played a role in its sudden disappearance? The mysteries of Tartessos remain as elusive as its riches, and each theory offers a piece of the puzzle, but none of them provide a definitive answer. As we look deeper into the remnants of Tartessos, we realize that the kingdom's fall is part of a larger narrative of rise and decay, a theme that has echoed through the ages. How many empires, once vibrant and powerful, have met the same fate? Tartessos, like many others, may have been a victim of its own ambition, an empire that reached too far, too quickly, before crumbling under the weight of its own success. Or was it that the wealth it amassed made it too vulnerable, inviting enemies and betrayals from within? But the question still remains, was Tartessos a victim of greed, or was it its own downfall? As we reflect on the kingdom's riches, its influence, and the mysterious events that led to its ultimate demise, we ask, what lessons can we learn from its story? We want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Tartessos was a victim of greed, driven to its destruction by an insatiable thirst for power and wealth? Or do you believe that internal corruption, political intrigue, or external threats led to its eventual fall? Was Tartessos's rise simply too much for the world to handle, or was it undone by forces within, by its own ambition? Comment below with your opinion. We're eager to hear what you think. Was Tartessos's wealth its greatest strength or its greatest weakness? Could it have survived, or was its end inevitable? Join the conversation and let's discuss the mystery of Tartessos together. As we draw this journey through the story of Tartessos to a close, we are left with more questions than answers. The kingdom may be gone, but its legacy remains. Tartessos was not just a civilization that existed and then vanished.
It was a symbol of what happens when wealth and power reach a tipping point. Its influence on the Mediterranean, through metalworking, trade, and culture, lives on, echoing through the ages, even as its physical presence has disappeared. The myths of golden apples, of an ancient garden of riches, are still told today, keeping the memory of Tartessos alive. The Hesperides, those guardians of the golden treasure, remind us that the wealth of Tartessos was not just about gold, but about something more, a legacy that transcended the material and became part of the collective imagination. Could Tartessos have become more than just a forgotten civilization? Could it have influenced the development of the Mediterranean world in ways we still don't fully understand? We can only wonder. But one thing is certain: Tartessos will never be forgotten. Its wealth, its trade, its artistry, and its mysterious fall will continue to captivate our imaginations for generations to come. And as we look to the future, we can't help but wonder, how many more Tartessos are still waiting to be uncovered? What other kingdoms, civilizations, and stories lie hidden beneath the surface of our world, waiting for the right moment to be rediscovered?